McMain.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Mitchell Swan, once again filling in this wonderful Monday for Marc.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, filling in for Marc again this wonderful Monday.
Sorry
and
about
I'll
that.
tell you, how was your weekend, Chastity?
Oh,
Good?
it was wonderful. We had a great, wonderful weekend with the family and the kids and the grandkids, so it was a
Oh,
great
that's great.
Mother's Day weekend.
Good for you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I
How
gotta
was your
tell you,
weekend?
My weekend is fine. It was sleepless. I'm so excited about this show. All I did was
Yes.
think about it. I got two incredible guests today. The first guest is going to be Jason Su, and what a man. I'm going to give you his intro in a second, and followed up by Greg Lai shortly after him on the second half of the show. But, you know, right now, consumer confidence in finance is at a record low. We are just not happy about the future of our investments. We're worried about where our family's going to be, and that's because of the growing national debt, the oil and energy disruption we're facing with the Strait of Hormuz. We got pending inflation. It just goes on and on. Obviously, just the expenses of housing right now. So it can feel overwhelming to people, and I wanted to bring in two guests that are just remarkable. And the first one we're going to talk to is Dr. Jason Su. And before I bring him on, he's a humble guy. I want to talk him up a little bit, cover the high points of him. He is the founder and chairman of Reliant Global Advisors, but he also serves as the lead investment strategist for Sowell Management. And that is a firm that my wife Leslie and I use for our firm here in Good Hope, Sapphire Wealth Management. Yes. So we have a close working relationship. And I got to listen to Jason last week, and just a brilliant man. But his background is that Jason was born in California. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science, summa cum laude, in physics at Caltech.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think we've had
Say
such a
that
smart
3
guest.
times,
Yeah,
right?
Say it once. He was awarded a master's degree in finance from Stanford University.
Wow.
And just to hit it with an exclamation point of how smart he is, he earned his PhD in finance from UCLA, where he conducted research on the equity premium, business cycles, and portfolio allocations of investors. Jason is a member of the board of directors for the Anderson School of Management at UCLA, as well as a professor in finance. This guy's talking to young kids and making them brilliant.
Wow. So it's safe to say Jason's his advice is golden.
It's safe to say I'm not qualified to interview this man. He also holds 3 visiting professorships in 3 universities in Taiwan. He's authored over 40 peer-reviewed articles, for which he received numerous awards for several of them, and he is also an associate editor for the Journal of Investment Management, and also serves as on the editorial boards of the Journal of Index Investing, Journal of Investment Consulting, and Journal of Investment Management. And more recently, Jason is at the forefront of smart beta. It's a revolution in the way people are looking at investments, and he's one of the world's most recognized thought leaders in that space. So, without that further ado,
Incredible.
Jason, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Mitch.
So glad to have you on. Did I get all of that right? I know I had to condense it down.
You're making me blush here.
It's all well earned. I've got receipts. I can look you up. You are a very bright guy. And you're calling in from Boston today. Is that correct?
That is correct. I'm actually looking at the Charles River right now.
Are you? Well, what's your opinion of the economy right now? Am I right with all these concerns and people being kind of less hopeful going forward? What are your thoughts on the economy these days and the national debt going forward?
Now, Mitch, if you were looking at the S&P 500, you wouldn't know it, but you are absolutely right. The real economy, I think, is struggling. There's a lot of concern with oil prices, with inflation, with the widening of the wealth gap between the tech haves and the rest of us have-nots. But of course, when you look at the stock market, right, it's new highs, it's up and up, it's raging bull market. So there is that disconnect. Let me kind of address what's happening with their real economy. As these tech companies are making new highs, their technology, of course, is in the process of displacing a lot of workers, right? And that's really what's driving the wedge between those who have done well with the AI revolution and previously with the internet revolution, and those that really haven't participated. So we're just looking at that problem, and really our national debt is a reflection of the government trying to plug that gap.
Interesting. What is that? What does filling that gap look like with regards to our national debt?
So as a macroeconomist, this is something that hopefully it makes all of us a bit more patient with our government and maybe a little bit more understanding of why we have this enormous debt. So first of all, Mitch, we're certainly not going to pay it off. I think, you and I were talking the other day, and I joked, look, we brought in Elon Musk, right? You like him, you hate him, but you can't argue. This is the man for the job if there's ever a hard job to solve, right? If he can't solve it, it might not actually be a problem. And so this is what I mean. When I talk to students, you think about what governments are supposed to do. We have this vision of a very wise king who makes all the right decisions. As a result, money are spent well and the country's prosperous. Now, you do need that if you are an emerging country, right?
Yeah.
A country that's poor and just need the government to do a lot of the right things, building the right infrastructure, setting the right industry policy, because there's not a strong, vibrant private sector. Now, that's not where the U.S. is at today, right? We have the world's most successful, most creative, innovative private sector that's doing most of the hard lifting, right? That's generating prosperity. And so what that means is the government steps back and say, okay, the prosperity issue is being solved by capitalism. It's solving by entrepreneurs. The government needs to then look at the wealth gap, right?
Yes,
Rising tide does not lift all boats. So the government's got to go and help out those that haven't been lifted. And that's where a lot of our deficit has come from. And that's where, in a way, the government is being very efficiently inefficient.
Interesting. So would that be fair to say then that this debt that we have right now is just the cost of doing business as being one of the most powerful, affluent nations in the world?
Absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of countries where they like to address their social inequality, their wealth inequality, but they're not prosperous enough to worry about that, right? I mean, I think in some ways we are lucky that we can have a very inefficient government that perhaps, hire a lot and pay out a lot of welfare to help solve the social problem that is a residual of our very thriving and successful capitalistic society. And so, I would look at that as we're able to afford it, and it's a champagne problem for a very successful country.
That's a great visual. So I think one of the things I heard you mention, and correct me if my memory fails, but if we're looking at a $40 trillion debt right now, it's something that's going to grow over time, but we have to remember that we have, I think 170 trillion of wealth among our population. Is that number close?
Mitch, you're absolutely right. And that is a number I think we don't point to enough. And sometimes, I think our founding father, being Puritans, we like to focus on what's not going well and the problems that we can solve and then where we can get better. But I think it's time for us to also celebrate, right? I mean, the last 30 years, this country has grown from a national wealth, and that's the household wealth across all Americans. If you aggregate that up, today, 30 years later, we have 10x that.
Wow.
And then let that set in. From 17 trillion to 170 trillion. We have created enormous aggregate wealth. Now, not everyone participated in it, at least not proportionally, but that's a lot of money to go around to bankroll the government to spend a bit more social welfare and be a bit more inefficient as a way of doing government business.
Well, that's really interesting. And as we look at that national debt and the struggle to take on more debt but keep interest rates low so the cost of the debt is low, one of the things, too, that you've had some insight on is the 60-40 portfolio. And for the listeners out there, I want you to understand we're just trying to give some thought things that you can go and talk to your advisors about. But one of the interesting thought pieces you had is we kind of made up the 60-40, mean 60% of your portfolio, maybe your 401k, should be in equities, and the other 40% in bonds. But we seem to be chasing up and down. When the market goes up, we raise interest rates. When the market goes down, we lower interest rates. What are your thoughts now on the 60-40 portfolio for investors?
Now, Mitch, there are lots to say about the 60-40. Now, first of all, it is, of course, the default, right? Everyone uses that. We hear it so often.
Oh, it's that pie
so
chart, right? I've seen people sit and fill in their 401k, and they look at their friend like Chastity and go, "What did you put?" "Oh, I circled this one." "Okay, that sounds good. I'll do it too."
And frankly, if you look at most brochures offered by investment advisors, right, you fill out a few things about your family, income, and when you like to retire, so on and so forth. And generally, what it comes back is 60-40, right? 60% in larger U.S. equities and 40% in U.S. debt. And like you said, Mitch, there is no science behind that. It is really an artifact of history, right? Some guy, just for illustration, said, well, how do we produce a portfolio that could, on average, get 8%? And they said, well, if the stock market produces, say, 10% per annum, you put 60% in that, and let's say, bonds produces, 5%, and then you put the other 40% in that, voila, 8% on average.
Right.
It's really for the sake of a round number, and there's no more science beyond that.
So one of your premises then is looking at that 60-40. If we say, well, there's no science behind that, one of the reasons we put bonds into these portfolios, that 40%, is to reduce, to achieve more stability, to reduce risk and volatility. But you talk about smart beta. So as I understand it, I'm going to let you do all the talking, but when someone says, I'm an alpha investor, I'm seeking alpha, what you're focused on is total return. You want to get the best possible return for your money. But betas, as I understand it, you're focused on reducing volatility, reducing risk, while still trying to achieve then a good total return. Did I summarize that in my ignorance well for the listeners?
No, you did a fantastic job. I think too much has been placed on alpha, right? Alpha is a smart guy outperforming the market, always making money. And I would say generally alpha is very hard to come by. And if you magically, found someone who's good at alpha, generally he charges a lot for his service. And oftentimes he's just doing so well trading for himself, he is actually not open for business. So I would say most of us, we don't need to focus that much on alpha. It's just not available to us, not a game we should be in. So focus on beta, right? If you just buy and own the global economy, and of course the U.S. is a big part of that, that is what we economists say, owning the beta. It just means you're participating in global growth and participating through owning the S&P 500, maybe the MSCI World portfolio. And Mitch, like you say, well, the world's got a lot of uncertainty, a lot of volatility, so when you just own the world, you want to be smart about that, right? Because we go through bubbles. I think some might argue we are having a bit of a bubble in the stock market right now. Yes, it's been up and up, a raging bull market, but you also recognize now a lot of stocks are trading at 200 times earnings. Even a sensible large cap name that you're familiar with, like a Apple or Microsoft, they're trading at a multiple. That looks very scary, right? You're probably not going to make your money back unless things, just go the way of perfection every quarter. And so you want to be smart about that, right? What do you do when there's a bubble in the stock market, especially one that is so narrowly concentrated in tech and actually a subsector, the AI, and you're not really being properly diversified across all of the industries in the U.S. or all the global economies and their industries. And so a lot of what I talk about in my paper on fundamental indexing, sort of outperform the S&P over time by being even more sensibly diversified and then being more anti-bubble, speaks to that, right? And I think right now the S&P 500 is not a diversified portfolio. It is literally one stock, right? You can think of it literally just a bet on one thing and one thing only, AI. And that's a concentrated bet that, again, it might work out, but for a rational investor who's looking at 20 years out, that may be a bet too big and too concentrated to take today.
So that people understand, well, first, going back to the Apple example, when you see multiples of the PE the way it is, you're having some sleepless nights. And so you're wrestling with, do I hold on to it and have another restless night, or do I go to cash? And I think what you're saying is there are great stocks globally you could invest in, have lower risk, that are still fairly value bought investments, and sleep better.
Absolutely. Mitch, when I talk to advisors and investors and I say, hey, are you internationally diversified? And of course, this is the first thing we teach to MBA students is to alert them to the fact that they probably just own U.S. stock, and some of them only own stocks in their own company, and that is a concentration that can be dangerous. And most people say, no, I'm perfectly fine. I bought Apple, it's the one stock I love. Maybe I bought Tesla, it's done really, really well. Why change? And what they don't realize is, how do you do well with a stock? Well, you do well with a stock by its price going up a lot, right? You've done well with the S&P 500 because it's gone from a PE when you were holding it 10 years ago of 13 to now, closer to, 22, 25. And so things have become quite expensive. You participated in that and you made money. It doesn't mean the future will be exactly the same because now things are twice as expensive as you bought them 20 years ago. And maybe taking profit is the right solution, right? Because buying things when they're expensive, like Warren Buffett says, is the greatest way to not earn a great return. You want to buy when things are cheap. And so you want to look elsewhere and say, other countries haven't performed as well as the U.S., not because they don't have great GDP growth, not because they don't have great corporate earnings growth. It's just they haven't benefited from this flood of capital that sort of pushed up valuation. So that's the way you want to look.
All right. Well, on that point, we're going to go to break. But when we come back, I want to pick back up on this global approach that you talk about and people's biases because of emerging markets. Again, you're all listening to Q92.3. This is the Marc McMain Show. Talk to you shortly.
I chuckled at a cartoon that showed a news conference by a United States senator who announced that he was divorcing his family so he could spend more time with politics. We may laugh, but the truth is many people make that statement every day. Maybe not with words, but with their actions. In fact, if a politician retires from his work to spend more time with his family, it becomes the lead story, met with cynicism on the evening news, while the one who rejects his family advancing his career is commonplace. God tells us we should work hard to the glory of God, but He has clearly shown that we must have priorities. A relationship with God first, and family follows that. What does your focus tell you about your priorities? The Bible says that we have brought nothing into this world and we can take nothing out of it. It's good to focus on the things that last, like putting God first, and then family, and then people all around us that God loves. This is Bryant Wright, speaking right from my heart.
Visit rightfromtheheart.org and click television to watch our TV spots.
I'm Marc McMain, Republican for State Senate, and I approve this message.
Hi, this is former Congressman Jody Heiss. I know what it's like to stand up to the radical left, and I trust Marc McMain to do the same thing in the state Senate. I've watched Marc lead when he served as GOP chairman. He didn't just sit on the sidelines. He helped Republicans, including President Trump, win Georgia. So join me in keeping the main thing the McMain thing. Vote for Marc McMain on May 19th. Paid for by Mark for Georgia Incorporated.
I'm Ward Black, Republican for State House, and I approve this message.
I'm Congressman Andrew Clyde, and I'm proud to endorse Ward Black for State House. Ward is a proven conservative who will fight and win for our conservative values. Whether it's standing up to woke ideology, lowering taxes, or stopping big government overreach, Ward will get the job done. In the race for House District 120, Ward Black has my complete endorsement and my vote. Join me in voting for Ward Black in the Republican primary on May 19th. Paid for by Ward Black, Inc.
Well, welcome back. You are listening to the Marc McMain Show. I'm Mitchell Swan, and we're having a wonderful talk with Dr. Jason Su. And before we went to break, we were just talking about having a global portfolio that's investing. And so, Dr. Su, one of the things that I have a bias on is for many years, I would look at these emerging market funds and be like, these guys are just invested in, generational poverty, enduring corruption, unrest in their nations. Why would I put money there? And I think one of the things you enlightened me to is that a country can have bad GDP and so forth, but still have good underlying companies that are doing well and building out that emerging market. Is that true?
Absolutely, Mitchell. So first of all, there are really two emerging markets, right? The one that actually emerged and become developed, right? You think of Japan at some point in the past, Japan was a emerging economy, and then it emerged and is one of the more successful developed economies. So think of Asia as largely following that model, right? Asian companies start to work for American companies, take over some manufacturing, trade a lot, and then they gradually emerge and become a very productive and contributing citizen to global trade. You also have the other emerging economy, and then I think it's not unfair, but you know, a lot of Latin economies continue to be emerging but never quite emerge. And I think, you know, Argentina until more recently is the poster child of that. So first of all, I think we just want to think about sort of the tale of two cities. The emerging Asia story, where hard work and just a heightened awareness of the importance of education, of an educated workforce, and how that can transform poverty into productivity. Right, so that is the model that you want to focus on when you invest. But equally important is the economy for an emerging market, like what I was just talking about for the U.S., can, again, have this dichotomy, right, where the GDP and the stock market don't actually do the same thing. So if you look at emerging Asia, what you have is initially the GDP is super, super strong. Right? You look at South Korea, of course, before that, you had Japan and now Taiwan, and of course the 800-pound gorilla, mainland China. It all starts with a strong GDP growth, where people start to accumulate wealth by working for American firms, trade with America, and then they start to build up their capital market. And now they have capital to invest in their own companies, and a thriving stock market emerges. So there's a lagging effect there. And so you don't want to go in too early. You want to go in right when that economy is sort of turning the corner and becoming emerged.
Well, one of the frustrating things for China was when the war was over, World War II, you know, Japan had been bombed. They were absolutely defeated. And by the 60s and 70s, they were roaring back. And nothing had really changed in China during those decades. But now they've certainly emerged. When we look about and talk about AI coming into all societies now on a global level, how does that compare to, say, like the year 2000, when we were, you know, before the pop, or 1999? People were making money like crazy. Are there opportunities right now people could talk to with investors about what they might be able to do with the introduction of AI?
Yeah, Mitch, absolutely. So I love the kind of the look back to the internet bubble, and then, of course, the true internet explosion that transformed our society and economy. Because I think there's, and this is just history rhyming, maybe repeating exactly. Look, we're kind of at the inning one, and I really do mean inning one of AI, in that most of the big companies today, who you think are the inevitable winner of the AI game, may not be here 10 years from now, right? You think of Cisco, right? That was the dominant hardware maker in the U.S. in 1991. It was inevitable. It made all the hardware. And
I remember.
Years later, it was irrelevant.
I remember people saying, "Hey, if you can buy JDS Uniface under $100, you load up the truck." And Lucent, remember that?
Lucent, right? Absolutely. And so I think you're going to see a repeat of that, which is you have a lot of bubbles, you have a lot of names that feel like they're going to be the winner, and then they're disrupted. So I would say hardware, historically what we have seen is generally hardware gets disrupted by, you know, the Japanese, South Koreans, Taiwanese, and now the mainland Chinese. I mean, they just always end up dominating the hardware game.
Yes.
While after the hardware wires up the entire world, then the software starts to dominate, and that's really then kind of U.S. and U.S. IP. So I do think the first phase of the AI revolution is going to be a lot of the Asian hardware makers, and you're already seeing how the Korean stock market, the Taiwan stock market has significantly outperformed the U.S. and made new highs. So I think we're going to see a repeat of that. You're going to see a lot of emerging Asia hardware really taking market share and winning like the first few innings of the AI baseball game.
Well, I think that's interesting. You remind me that when I go back to 99, I still had copper cable running to my house, and I had to plug in my cable to that to get my TV to work. And now you don't even have really hardline phones have become unpopular. You know, they just not in the same abundance because fiber optic rolled in, and then we could get routers, and now our house has Wi-Fi. So what you're saying is there's going to be some type of bandwidth need that isn't out there right yet, but maybe they'll have to expand that, and we'll have to look at how our homes are wired.
Yeah, and the data centers, right? Like brand new data centers. What was appropriate for the internet, for cloud computing, is no longer appropriate or anywhere near adequate in terms of just the power supply, the sheer computational power you now need for these new data center and cloud centers. So everything's going to have to be redone. And, when the internet was going through that rewiring the world for internet phase, emerging Asia outperformed the S&P 500 by 9% per annum for a 10-year stretch, right? So we're talking about an incredible outperformance, 9% reliably every year for a 10-year stretch. I think we're going to see that again.
Wonderful. What are some other themes out there that excite you these days, or at least interest you? Maybe there's nothing exciting out there right now, but what do you find interesting, sir?
Well, I think we are going to get our rate cut, and part of that is, look, Mitch, you and I started talking about the $40 trillion in U.S. debt, and with AI creating even more U.S. household wealth and creating perhaps an even gap in terms of wealth inequality, we're going to see more government expenditure. So we're going to have to lower interest rate for nothing else. It's just to reduce our government debt servicing, right? So I'm a big believer, come hell or high water, we're going to put the energy shock driven inflation to rest, and the new Fed chair is going to understand that he's going to also have to stabilize government finances. So I think lower interest rate is in the future, not just short end, but across the entire yield curve. And that's going to be a big relief to American households, to American businesses. And, of course, it's going to be a tailwind to the stock market.
Yes, sir. Where do you see the petrodollar in a few years? Think we're going to still have it? Do you think we just have to stop getting used to having 100% of all the sales and be settled down to a percentage of global exchange?
I think there is going to be a diversification away from the dollar. Again, it's not because the rest of the world is betting against the U.S. or that the kind of faith and credit of the U.S. government is significantly lower now. It is just, look, the world's always looking to diversify, right? And diversifying into gold. That's been the reason behind the massive gold rally. Yeah. Perhaps now the world is G2, right? China being a major player, there may be diversification into the renminbi, just because so many countries trade with China, and why not pay China directly in renminbi instead of U.S. dollars? So I think you're going to see that. It's less about American strength waning, but it's more about diversification across all reasonable currencies for the central banks of the world.
Well, thank you, sir. Well, I know that we've got one of your good friends coming up right behind you, Greg Lai. He's going to give us a few insights. But, Doctor, if people want to learn more about you, where can they go?
Well, first of all, they can definitely Google me and connect with me through LinkedIn. I publish a newsletter that talks about our national debt, our GDP, other macro issues of interest, things you and I, Mitch, have talked about. And, of course, come to our corporate website. There'll be a lot of research and useful tools for investors, and that would be funds.rayliant.com.
Wonderful. And I also want to just share with everyone, you have a relationship with Sowell Management Company, so they can go to sowellmanagement.com, or even come by my office with my wife Leslie at Sapphire Wealth Management, and we'd be happy to pass your information on to them. So once again, you've made us all feel much better, Dr. Su. I'm not going to sweat the cost of our abundance anymore when I look towards the national debt, and I'm going to understand that it's okay not to have a 60-40 portfolio if I'm actually going for stability and seeking beta, and we're going to get a rate cut. That was my takeaways.
Thanks, Mitch.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Have a blessed day. All right, folks, we'll be right back, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Greg Lay and hear his thoughts on where we're going as a nation economically and financially.
I'm Clark Dean, and I'm running for governor to bring bright, competent executive leadership for a better Georgia. Georgia needs a governor who puts service above self, who puts Georgia families first and knows how to be tough without being mean.
Don't be mean. Vote for Clark Dean.
Don't be mean. Vote for Clark Dean.
Don't be mean. Vote for Clark Dean. Woohoo!
I'm Clark Dean, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Clark Dean for governor.
John Supermarket in downtown Monroe is proud to serve the Walton County community for over 50 years. 3 generations of the Thompson family offering the freshest produce, quality meats, everyday essentials, and now featuring Bistro South, a quick service restaurant with freshly made Southern cuisine and ready-to-heat gourmet meals. Always proud to support local farmers and suppliers, John Supermarket has the best meat in town and tons of weekly specials. Stop by and see them for all the ingredients, meals, snacks, sweets, gifts, and everything in between you need.
Is your home's AC ready for spring? Call Tony Beck Heating and Cooling for tune-ups or to install a new heating and cooling system. As a Lennox Premier dealer, we provide expert service, and it's an investment that pays off with lower energy bills. For a limited time, purchase a new qualifying Lennox system for up to $1,800 in rebates, or qualified buyers make no payments, incur no interest for 12 months when financing a new Lennox system. Contact Tony Beck Heating and Cooling at 770-466-2924 or beckheating.com today. Conditions apply. See dealer for details. HVAC license number CN001627.
Madison Flooring, located at 1167 Eatonton Road in Madison, is your full-service and professional installation center for all kinds of flooring, from tile, carpet, laminate, wood. They even do showers. They have granite and quartz countertops. All military, police, firefighters, and teachers ask for your discount. Madison Flooring is locally owned and operated. For knowledgeable and friendly service, call 706-431-5152.
Well, welcome back, everyone, to the Marc McMain Show on Q92.3. I'm Mitchell Swan, sitting in for Marc this wonderful Monday. And our next guest, what a guy. I'm so grateful for him coming on, Greg Lai. And just as an intro, because he's also very humble, doesn't brag about himself, but Greg is the principal and lead portfolio manager for Affinity Investment Advisors and is a chief investment officer, serving as the director of portfolio strategy for Sowell Management, again, a firm Leslie and I use for our business here in Good Hope, Sapphire Wealth Management. So again, I have to declare that Greg and I do have a close working relationship, but he is a brilliant man. He just hangs out with bad people. I bring his reputation down. Greg has earned his MBA from the Paul Merage School at the University of California, Irvine. Great campus. I love that place. He has an undergraduate degree in chemistry from UCLA, and he holds the designation as a chartered financial analyst. In addition to Greg's founding role with Affinity way back in 1992, your experience includes senior portfolio manager and managing director at Morgan Stanley Investment Management. That is huge. Van Kampen Mutual Funds. That is a mind-boggling amount of money to manage. And Invesco Limited. And you also played a role leading the U.S. Active Equity Team and quantitative specialists for co-managed portfolios at the Pacific Investment Management Company, which we all know as PIMCO. And good morning, Greg. Thank you so much for calling in and joining me.
Good morning, Mitch. I feel old now with an introduction like that. That is a lot of stuff.
Well, try to look your age then, my friend, because you certainly don't. Did I get all of that correct?
You did. I mean, I think the takeaway is I've probably seen a lot and made every mistake. So let's hope that experience helps.
Well, yeah, they're all out of your system now. But your team has been around for 30 plus years, and what I really resonate with, because Leslie and I had worked with some big outfits during our careers, and at some point we just said, you know what, we're getting away from this. It's not personal. It's not anything. You stepped away from all those firms that for a period of time you were managing money for all of them, as I understand, and you went back with your team back to your roots just to have a more individual relationship.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, through that journey, we find that there are other forces or agendas or priorities, if you will. But we really wanted to get back to being very client-centric and focusing on what was best for our clients. And so being independent and serving advisors, my father was an advisor, so it's in my DNA. But what we did on the institutional side for all those clients is it's really the same thing that we do for Mr. and Mrs. Jones.
Yeah, well, I think of all those jobs you had, and it's one thing to try and juggle 3 balls at one time, but when someone has 30 in the air, you're just getting worn out. You can't keep up that momentum. But on a side note, what I want to share with people is you also wanted to be an astronaut in the 1980s. Like, this may never have occurred except for an event that happened, but you were approved for an internship at NASA.
Close, yes. And anyone growing up in that period of time, I think when you're a kid in the late '60s, early '70s, and then with the advent of the shuttle launch, I went to UCLA and I wanted to be a chemist so that I could be an astronaut. And when I graduated in '85. I got a job at Aerospace Corp, and yes, the Aerospace Corp was really they programmed and did everything for the shuttle, and particularly I was in material science, and that was sort of the dream, is to sort of take those experiments up into space.
And then what happened?
Well, unfortunately, January of '86, the Challenger crashed, and so that whole program went on hiatus as they took a fine-tooth comb to sort of all the issues that caused that tragedy.
Well, it was a tragic day. I remember watching that live, and I'm sorry that pathway for you got closed, but I am very grateful that you're here with us. Don't leave us for Artemis 2. That would be very sad. Don't dust off that old resume and try to leave us.
No, they don't take old guys like me now.
Well, I wanted to bring you in because you're one of our senior strategists, and you've obviously run with the biggest of big dogs, and I know everyone right now is so concerned about their investments, their future, making car payments, the price of gas going up every day. Should I be in the market? Should I not? Should I be buying gold and bullets? I mean, I'm in Georgia. That's what people think about here, guns and ammo. But I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts right now in financial times, and maybe your thoughts more specifically on the difference between actively managed investments, which you've been a part of, and just passive investment strategies? And you may have to define those to the listeners too.
Sure. We have some strong thoughts around that. Passive is the index, and I think earlier I heard what Dr. Jason explained it very well. These passive indices, they're cap weighted, so the size of the company determines its weight in the index. There is no fundamental overlay on why it's in the index or not. It's the largest 500 names or the largest 1,000 names, and that weight in the index is determined by its capitalization. And what that means is it's determined by its price. And if it goes up, it becomes a bigger name. So NVIDIA, we call them the Mag 7. They're magnificent, all right, because they've done well, but they are now a bigger part of this passive index. And we sort of make fun of it a little bit. You wouldn't want to hire a passive doctor or a passive lawyer, right?
Right.
You wouldn't even want to have a passive military, I guess, if we think about it in today's terms. But the investments are constructed passively. And I guess that works when there are big trends in technology and AI, and some of these names participate. It's just that, and a way to sort of distill it down is, if I like McDonald's and I eat McDonald's, I'm forced to eat more because I like it. And the more I eat it, the more I have to like it. And what happens, right? And then for the passive index, if you don't like something, you have to sell the whole index. Active managers have historically looked for value. They've historically managed portfolios that tended to be smaller in capitalization, and they would tend to sell names that got a high valuation. And I think Dr. Jason said the average PE is maybe around 22. That's on the high side, and that's primarily driven by some of these Mag 7 names. So if we fundamentally didn't like NVIDIA anymore, we couldn't sell it. We'd have to sell the whole index. And so that is sort of the big difference.
Well, I think with the popularity of just picking an ETF or an index and putting it in every single month through your 401k or however you might be doing it, it does create almost like an auction house event. Every month people keep bidding on it, and it keeps going up in price, and next month you bid on it, and you're not even paying attention to whether you're getting a good value for what you're buying. And when there are those 7 stocks making up the index that are on fire and dragging the whole index up, people forget there's some big players that only own the 7 companies outside of that. If they were ever to sell, it was going to crush the whole index. All 500 will go down with the 7. Is that a fair assumption, or I get that wrong?
No, that is fair, and this is a unique situation that the index finds itself in, because typically, when they built this index, they didn't contemplate this scenario. There was a moment in time when they did have a really big name called GE, General Electric,
yes.
and at the time it was maybe 3 or 4% of the index. Nothing near the weights that Apple and Nvidia and Google are. Those are in the 8, 9, 10%, and then multiply them by 7 or whatever the number is. Yeah. You're talking, as you said, about 50% of the movement. And so it wasn't totally contemplated back then. Now, what you did say, which does resonate with me, is markets move on what we call the marginal buyer or seller. And so if everyone has their fill of Apple, like I can't buy any more Apple because I either own it so much or the index owns it so much, then the next seller, the next person who looks at Apple is a seller. And that's what can create these booms and busts, because everyone's buying, and then the last seller is not a buyer, he's a seller, and then that produces many marginal sellers. And the index, as you duly noted, when someone sells it, then it sells everything else. But in its fundamentally, buying, investing every month is really a great concept, right? Dollar cost averaging and getting exposed to the market. I think Dr. Jason called it beta. That's always a good thing for young people. It's just that this index is constructed very narrowly now.
Well, I talk about, and you hit on it, how these things can get very expensive relative to PE. And I'm going to it's a crazy analogy, I'm just making it up. But if you think of the carnivore diet and you tell people, man, you got to start just eating all meat. And they're like, Mitch, are you crazy? Have you seen expensive ribeyes are? Well, yeah, everyone wants the ribeye, but you can get the same benefit if you go buy the hamburger, right? So, everyone wants to own these 7 stocks, but they're so expensive. Perhaps there's other stocks out there that you can pursue that will give you a great return at a much more reasonable value price.
That has actually occurred. So, as we look at this AI trend and sort of its impact on not only on what the future, but sort of the stocks today that sort of produce that, it has over the last year trickled down. So if you didn't own utility stocks or own semiconductor memory stocks or storage stocks, those weren't part of the Mag 7. And Caterpillar, which is a great name when you think about having to build data centers. So the market has actually broadened to include what you have sort of, I think it's a great analogy, of called sort of maybe the second tier names that would participate because of this AI revolution. And there will be others. So even the common companies that are doing things outside of technology, whether it's retailers or consumer durables or real estate, anything like that, AI will touch that, and those companies will be able to exploit that technology to create earnings. And then, as you duly noted, they're not selling at high valuation, so they'll create some operating leverage by using the tech, but in a different way that's really relevant to their company.
Yes, sir. Well said. I was also thinking of passive investment and actively managed investments because of tax consequences.
Yep.
I've seen your portfolios, and when someone's way up in something, the only way we can help them make more money is not to pay taxes. Keep the gain. But are they able to kind of? They can't account for buying and selling inside these indexes or ETFs. Are there tax advantages to managed investments?
Well, you've touched on something which is really very important. It's not what you make, but it's what you keep, and particularly after taxes. And so mitigating taxes is really smart across all investments, and equities even more so. So tax management is very important. When we think about looking at a portfolio, we want to sort of offset as much as those gains, even if it's in a name that is trading quite high. Sometimes we do have to pay taxes, but low turnover, buy and hold for a longer period of time does mitigate taxes.
Yes, sir. And again, we're talking the difference between an unsheltered investment account and
Correct.
a tax-deferred account like your IRA.
Yep.
What are some themes right now for investors? You're being listened to in 4 different counties. Lots of people are tuning in. You got their attention. But a lot of them are young, and they're just getting started. Or maybe they've delayed investing because they're like, look, I think we're in scary times. And some of them are older, and they're even scared because they're like, well, the market did well for me over these many years, but I'm afraid of losing it all. What are some themes that or investment strategies you would give to a young investor and maybe an older investor?
Well, that's pretty good. I'll take the young one first because that's a little bit easier, hopefully, because they have the biggest asset, which is time. And so they should be dollar cost averaging. They should not really look at the level of the market. And they should be kind of excited when the market comes down because that means they'll get to buy that market at a discount. I call it a time machine. If you look at a chart and then you go and you make a horizontal line going back to wherever that the market is corrected to, that's like getting in a time machine. So young people should just dollar cost average, and they should think that the future of their investments is going to be built up over time. So time is their biggest weapon or their biggest asset for the market. So they shouldn't be thinking about the level. They should just be investing a little bit every month, no matter what the level.
Yes, sir. And before I let you carry on, my producer is waving at me because I went over the break period. I find you fascinating. So when we come back, I want you to pick up on some strategies for older people, and with your bond experience, maybe talk about bonds a little bit for folks. Well, when we come back, you're listening to the Marc McMain Show on Q92.3.
Are you looking for new tires? Well, look no further than Madison Car Care. They have the largest selection, and you'll always get the best price. They also handle a wide range of auto repairs, from the small things like oil changes and wiper blades to the big things like suspension, parts, and radiators. They offer all kinds of accessories, from toolboxes to bed covers, side steps, and they even install those awesome ranch hand bush guards. Give them a call at 706-342-4774 or stop by at 1040 Confederate Road in Madison.
I'm Miranda, founder of the Humane Society of Walton County. We're a community-funded no-kill shelter for homeless dogs and cats. On May 30th, we're raffling off a brand new 2024 Jeep Wrangler or $40,000 in cash. Tickets start at $30 each, with only $5,000 being sold. To purchase your tickets, visit humanewalton.org. You don't want to miss this chance to win a brand new 2024 Jeep Wrangler or $40,000 in cash, all benefiting the Humane Society of Walton County.
Affordable housing is just around the corner at Cimarron Park. Cimarron Park is a mobile community located on Harry Arnold Road, just off of Highway 78 in Monroe, that offers 2- and 3-bedroom homes with spacious wooded lots, lit streets, and a family-friendly atmosphere. Some homes are for sale with available financing. Call James for all the details. 404-401-1068. That's 404-401-1068. Or go to CimarronPark.com.
At Boss Brothers, we're getting ready for summer. You've got baby chicks, now's the time to move them to the coop. We have everything you need for an easy transition and knowledgeable staff to help you every step of the way. Check out our wild bird department with a great selection of feeders and brand new wild bird feed to keep your backyard birds happy all season long. Stop in today and get everything you need for summer at Boss Brothers, your one-stop shop for chicks, pet feed, garden supplies, and more. Located at 3084 Highway 78 in Loganville.
Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Marc McMain Show, and I'm Mitchell Swan, sitting in for Marc, and we've been having a wonderful conversation with Greg Lai. He is the principal and lead portfolio manager for Affinity Investments, and before we went to break, he was about to tell us some strategies and thoughts for older investors. So, welcome back, Greg.
Thank you. Well, you made a comment about bonds, and I think for a good part of our lives, bonds have been great investments because interest rates have come down and systematically come down over decades. So recently we saw that we could lose money on bonds in a high inflationary environment. So I'm not a bond expert per se. I ran equities at PIMCO. But I think for older people, they should really look at cash potentially or U.S. Treasuries as something that they could anchor as opposed to extending duration with their bonds. I think inflation can still be a risk here. Even now we're sort of fighting to get to lower rates. We see more economic growth. All that leads into inflation. Higher energy prices leads into inflation. So for older people, it's okay to own cash, particularly if you have expenses that are not inflationary, like my parents. They don't have kids in college. They don't travel a lot. They own their home. So inflation isn't affecting them. They have their own individual inflation. So cash is okay here, and definitely the markets are quite high. And I think they should have had some equities, and now is the time to probably move away from high growth stocks, which we talked about the S&P 500 having a lot of those, and buying indexes or managers that will look for value outside of the typical tech names. And you've seen some of those names do well, like gold, silver, utilities. Interestingly, no one's ever really talked about how well those have done. Financials, those are not AI tech names, and they've done well.
Yes, sir. Well, if we then step away from bonds, and of course there's the active and there's the passive investment of bonds. People can buy bonds and ETFs, or they can go out and hand pick them. But the other way too is with dividends. How would you say dividends are doing through this economy? Are they still staying stable and being paid?
They are, and I think that's one of the great things about U.S. equities is that there are many companies that pay a dividend, so you can sort of get the dividend and the appreciation. More recently, high dividend has done well, and I think there is a little bit of a rotation away from some of the high-tech names. The Mag 7 have not done as well as they've done in the past, and when we look at earnings of those Mag 7, we've seen some discrimination. So of the Mag 7, really only Amazon and Google have done well, or at least relative to what they have done in the past. That tells me something, that the market is becoming more discriminating around earnings.
Interesting, yeah. Well, I always try to remind people, when a company is doing well and it's got profit, dividends are just a way of sharing that profit back to their investors. So you know that they're making money. And oftentimes we get into these growth stocks, as you said, they don't pay a dividend, and perhaps they're not even, making a profit yet.
Yeah, and some of those equities they pay capital gains. So sometimes the people at those companies, they really want the stock price to go up rather than distributing a dividend. And so that's a little bit of a misalignment. But the other side of the coin is dividend-paying companies, they're probably selling at lower valuations because there's a whole host of people chasing those capital gains.
I'm a guy that likes low valuations. I'm cheap. I like to get things that are affordable. But I understand the value of the others as well. How are you, when you look at the world, are you a U.S. equity guy, or do you just try to find good investments globally?
Typically, we have been very centered on U.S. equities. And typically, emerging markets and international stocks, they're very well correlated to the U.S. And so one primary reason to invest outside of the U.S. is for diversification, but that never really pays off. So that's number one. Number two, our expenses are in U.S. dollars, and so we want to be sure that most of our assets are tied to the inflation that we're going to experience. So typically, our focus has been on U.S. stocks.
Now, is your team, as you said, your 30-plus years experience, when you look at our economy, are there areas that give you hope? And what are the areas that perhaps keep you awake at night a little bit? Are you concerned with what's going on around the world, basically?
Well, we should always be concerned, and I think markets there is a rhythm and a cycle to it. So we're very much into this bull market as exhibited by stock prices. So yes, I do worry about valuations, particularly in these Mag 7 names, the names that are so popular and bought by the index. Now, the other side of the coin is that leaves a fair amount of names that are trading at much better valuation. So there is opportunity. That's something that PMs have to be sensitive to. They have to be able to have conviction to buy these other names, knowing that if the NVIDIA continues to go higher, they may underperform, and that's not easy. Our experience tells us over time that, as you said, valuation will win out, and that's everything in our life. Everyone's really good at spotting where the discount is, just not in stocks. It's funny.
Well, I know here in Georgia, we're blessed to have the taxes waived at the gas pump, but you still go by every single day. You see it going up. The world just seems to be getting more expensive. But as you focus on the U.S., and just broadly, not specific companies, but is there a sector that you think is appealing, or maybe even a safe haven if it's not appealing to go up for folks?
Well, as I said, I think one of the great things is this productivity, and there's another dynamic, too, which is the transition of assets from the baby boomers to the new generation. I think GDP is going to be higher over the next 5 to 7 years here in the U.S. As that money is transferred. The next generation will probably spend a little more than the boomers ever did. So anything that's consumer-related, I think will do probably better than expected. There'll be many businesses that exploit AI on the sales side, on the consumer experience side. So I really believe that there'll be more of a rotation than a correction as that technology and those profits move to what I would call the non-Mag 7. And we've seen that, like I mentioned before.
Yes, sir. Well, I find you fascinating. If people are listening to this and they want to learn more about you, where can they go?
Well, the first thing they should do is they should probably contact you, Mitch, because you and I hang out and you get to hear the latest and the greatest. But we do have a website, and from time to time we're guest speakers in certain things. But generally, we work with people like yourself, Mitch, and we'd love to have you be a conduit for us.
All right. Well, thank you for that kind word. But I also want to just encourage people. He does have a website, not advertising, but it's affinityinvestments.com. You can also research sowellmanagement.com because, again, Greg is one of our chief investment officers with that outfit. And again, as he said, you can come by our office. And I got to thank you, my friend. You're out there in California. We need you to move your corporate headquarters to Georgia, by the way. Very tax friendly.
Yeah, California's got we're taxed quite a bit.
It's changed since you were a kid out there, didn't it?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we appreciate you keeping the lights on out there on the West Coast for us, and really getting up, not early, but it was 9:30 in the morning when you called, and I'm sure you had other things you could do. So, Greg, thank you so much, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Mitch. Anytime.
All right, brother. And folks, well, thank you for tuning in with us. I hope you got something out of today's show, trying to make you feel a little more optimistic about our financial future.
Wonderful job.
We got Chastity smiling. She wasn't smiling when the show was starting as I was going through all the doom and
Gives
gloom.
me hope.
But those are some really wise men, and we don't know everything, so it's nice to have smarter people come in, and iron sharpens iron, and share their thoughts with us. And so, everyone, I just want to thank you again for joining us. This is the Marc McMain Show on WQ. No, I messed it all up.
WMOQ.
WMOQ. See, I just got to say Q. It's just Q, 92.3.
That Q's there.
All right, I'm going to get the bumper sticker. Thank you all.
There you go.